We are going to be recording this session. I did record the last session, however, I failed to upload it to YouTube. I was just looking for it tonight and realized that I never actually posted the session to YouTube. So it is recorded. So last week's session we will be able to get uploaded for you. So I'll do that at the end of this session. We'll get it posted for you. All right, so a couple of things to cover. Let's talk a little bit about EasyStone working with CorelDRAW X7. For those of you who have X7, I don't know if any of you currently have been using X7 or not with EasyStone, but you can use CorelDRAW X7 with EasyStone. However, the current installers are for CorelDRAW X5 and X6. But in order to work with it with X7, it is pretty simple to do yourself if you want to. So for those of you who have CorelDRAW X7, we'll show you quickly how to get it in there. Let's see here. I am sick, Ann. You asked if I was sick, and I have been sick for days. It's driving me crazy. But, and of course, I refuse to go to the doctor unless I'm actually dying. So, but I'll get over it. Now, Krista says she can't see nothing. Well, maybe she can now, though. Because now I turned my screen on. So maybe I didn't have my screen turned on. All right. So anyhow, getting back to what to do if you want to try EasyStone with X7. Once we actually release EasyStone 4, which we'll do at the conclusion of this class, we'll do it before Christmas. I don't know exactly what day we'll drop it, but sometime between now and Christmas Day, basically we'll release EasyStone for everybody. Up to this point, only those who have joined the masterclass, who registered for the masterclass, have had access to EasyStone version 4. But we'll have a demo available for all current EasyStone users. So we'll have a just like we've always done a 60-day demo. So you'll have 2 full months to use it. And for those of you who have a license and want to upgrade, you'll be able to do that after that 60-day demo. Of course, those of you who are on a Design of the Day program, there is no charge for the new version of EasyStone, so that's automatically included. All updates are automatically included with your Design of the Day membership. So if you want to use, there's a couple of things I want to go over here. If you want to use EasyStone, we'll go to your C drive here. First of all, if you want to use EasyStone with CorelDRAW X7, we must have the 32-bit version of CorelDRAW X7 installed. I was originally going to support the 64-bit version of X7. However, I've made an executive decision and decided that's not necessary. So we decided we'll just have it just like it was previously. You do need the 32-bit version installed. I personally would not recommend the 64-bit version right now. It's really not going to give you any real advantage. You might see a small, tiny performance enhancement if you're using 64-bit, but most of us don't have that fancy of a computer to utilize the extra power that we would get with 64-bit anyhow. Now, I would recommend, now my system here, let's see here. If we go to, let's go back here. So I'm here in Windows Explorer, and if I right-click on this PC and choose Properties, you'll get this window. I'm running Windows 8 still, and you can see my processor speed. I have an i7 chip, which is one of the later chips. I don't know, they may have a newer one than this now, but this is a pretty new laptop that I'm working off of. But you can see my RAM is 12 gigs of RAM. If you look at your computer and all you're seeing is 8 gigs of RAM, then there's absolutely no advantage to you to moving to 64-bit. Anything over 8 gigs of RAM, then technically, yes, there is a performance enhancement moving to 64-bit. But again, for what we're doing in EasyStone, you wouldn't really see much of a enhancement anyhow. So, but what I wanted to talk about is if you have CorelDRAW X7, the original install CD, if you look at the CD, the actual CD contents, what you would do is you would come into Windows Explorer and right-click on your CD-ROM drive and choose the Explore option. This says expand, but you'd probably see an Explore option. What you're going to see on that CD is you're going to find an x86 folder, and in that folder is going to be a setup file. It'll say setup, and that will allow you to install the 32-bit version of CorelDRAW on your Windows 64-bit machine. So most of us have Windows 64-bit machines. So in order to install the 32-bit version, that's what we would have to do. Okay, so once you have the 32-bit version of CorelDRAW X7 installed, because we don't yet have an installer specifically for CorelDRAW X7, and I should point out too that the old version of EasyStone will work with X7 as well as version 4. So either one, if you want to try it with X7, you can by doing this. So if we go into Program Files x86, go down to Corel, this is what you're going to see. Now on my machine, I bought CorelDRAW X7 maybe a year ago. I mean, it's been a while, and I've never installed it. But you'll see on my machine, I have X5 and X6. You would also see X7 here if you had X7 installed. So what we need to do is go into X6 folder, go into Draw, go into GMS, and what I would do is I would just copy the whole folder. So just copy the whole folder and then come back out to your X7 folder, and you'd go into, again, Draw, GMS, and paste. And then the next time you opened up CorelDRAW X7, you would see EasyStone in the list of macros available for you. Okay, so that's how you would get it into X7 manually until we create a CorelDRAW X7 specific installer that will automatically put it into that folder for you. So pretty straightforward, but once you have it in there, then it should basically work the same way. Is anyone having trouble hearing me? I have reports of someone cannot hear me. It shows. Kathy, maybe, I don't know, turn up your speakers maybe. Because I guess no one else is complaining that they can't hear me. So hopefully you can get that fixed. All right. So anyhow, that covers installing it on CorelDRAW X7. It's just a matter of copying a few files over to the appropriate folder within your CorelDRAW X7 folder, and then you should be good to go from there. If you've registered it once with CorelDRAW X6, you won't have to register it again. As long as it's on the same computer. So it doesn't matter which version you install it from. All right, so let's go ahead, and because this is our last session, if there's anything in particular, no one, Anna asked how many computers you can have CorelDRAW on. Well, I believe the license says 2. One desktop, one laptop. And we did have a question before. It's if you did install CorelDRAW 64-bit and 32-bit, would that count as 2 licenses? And it does not. So once you've installed CorelDRAW 64-bit, if you've registered that version with CorelDRAW, and then you later install the 32-bit version, the 32-bit version would automatically be registered. So it uses the same license file no matter if you're using 64-bit or 32-bit. So just because you have it installed twice, 32-bit and 64-bit on one computer, that is not 2 installations. It's just considered 1. So Krista asked if I could hear you, and I could not because you are all muted. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in. There's a little chat box there. You can type in whatever question you may have or a particular topic that you want to see demonstrated or whatever it might be, and I'll see that pop up on my secondary screen, and then I can answer that accordingly. All right. I wanted to talk about a question that came up. So here it is. Here's a question that came up. This is a template that Krista had sent me that she cut out. And you can see a couple of these stones here are very, very close together. And if you look over here, these stones actually overlap one another. And for someone new to rhinestones like she is, you have to understand why that is. Well, I have this real problem with perfectionism. Everything I like to have, if you've noticed, I spend a lot of time perfecting files. And sometimes, like here, I don't really like how this stone is kind of split in the middle there. So, but I'd rather use 2 SS6s and have a better intersection there or whatever. But in this particular case, this file was specifically designed to use all SS10. And what I was trying to explain was when we have our files, when we cut our files, our stone size is a specific size, which in this case, in my case, I use 3.4 millimeters. Well, my machine cutting 3.4 millimeters and your machine cutting 3.4 millimeters, your machine may actually cut a slightly different size hole than my machine does because of the way your machine's calibrated. So really what we need to do is we need to figure out what size your stone should be, what diameter your stone should be, but also what the spacing should be. And there's basically 2 different ways to go about it. We could either, whatever cutting software you have, there would be a way to modify your parameters for your cutter. So we could change the parameters in our cutting software that would allow us to modify exactly how our cutter cuts. So in other words, if we were to cut a 1-inch square in our cutter, we would have to measure it probably with a caliper to see, is it truly exactly 1 inch or is it 1 inch and 1 millimeter? So what is our cutter actually cutting? And most of the time they're set up properly, but not always. So it's a good test. Now we do have and I'll point this out too, we do have let's go over here to the website here. We do have a little cut test file. So if we go into Rhinestone Design Shop, everyone should cut this once. It's called Cutter Test. So when you're starting out, there is a bunch of holes here. Okay, so what you would do is you download this file. Obviously, it's a free file. You download it, you cut it, and what it will allow you to do is start brushing in your rhinestones and find out which set of holes is the sweet spot for the particular rhinestone that you're using. Machine cut, Korean grade, SS6, 10s, 16s, whatever it might be. You can cut this out. And so I think where it starts is I think it starts at like 2.3 millimeters. Then this one's 2.4, 2.5, etc. So it goes up in increments of 1 millimeter. And you would be surprised if you're having trouble with SS6 stones. Now, the other day, Krista lives right near me, and the other day I was over there cutting some templates. And what I found was she was doing a SS6 alphabet, And what I found was the settings that we picked to use, I think was 2.6 millimeter. The SS6 stones brushed in just fine, but it didn't take much effort to knock them back out of the hole. So it's good to go through this and really study, because I wondered myself if we had cut this template using one, so instead of 2.6 millimeter, had we used 2.5, would the stones have still brushed in? But because there would have been a little bit less play, would it have been harder to then kick them back out again? So if you're struggling with brushing your stones in, then obviously your hole's too small, and making that tiny little bit of adjustment of a millimeter, sometimes even a half a millimeter. In this case, these are actually a difference of a tenth of a millimeter, which is almost nothing. But you'd be surprised. You really would be surprised what the difference 1/10 of a millimeter could actually make. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're struggling brushing stones in, try to use a little bit larger stone size, and sometimes just a tenth of a millimeter can make all the difference. If you're able to brush them in, but then they're falling back out as you keep swashing over the template, then your hole size probably a tenth or 2/10 of a millimeter too big. So you have to play with it a little bit, and this will help you kind of zero in what that sweet spot is. Then once you have your sweet spot, then you have two options. Either calibrate your cutter using those stone sizes so you get the right circle size, so you can just use our templates by default, or you can set your own. So you see here we have our fixed stone sizes. This is the size that I use. I don't use 4.3. I use 2.6, 3.4, and 4.8. So 6, 10, 16. Now you may find out that either you want to use these sizes also, but then you'll need to calibrate your cutter to actually cut using these dimensions, or you could set whatever size you want. And once you find out what your cutter is already cutting, you can leave the calibration alone on the cutter and then just change it here in the template. And that's what I want to show you, because I would guess most of you would choose to not modify the calibration of your cutter off the factory calibration, that if you find you need to change it up a little bit, you do it here. So this is what I want to show you. So let's go to 2.4. We'll do a pretty drastic difference, 3.2, and let's do 4.5. So I've reset these new stone sizes, and I hit Save Defaults. All right, so now when I import a design, let me just find a design to import here. This is that Santa design that we did the other day. So here is our Santa file. So when you get the designs from the design of the day, or you purchased our design, and it's not really just our design, it would really be the same with anyone's design. If we look at these stone sizes right here, you can see that we're using 3.4 and 2.6, right? And then the big one here is 4.8. But we need them to be this, 2.4, 3.2, and 4.5. So what you would do is find out where your sweet spot is on your stone sizes, and then we could just take the whole design and hit CD, Convert Design. And that will show you this. And what it's showing you is it's found the RGB value. This is not a stone. So what we can do is just right here, see where it says Select Shapes? You can click on that button, and it'll select this gray shape. And then down here, we can change that to a weed box. And so now this item, if you look here in the bottom of CorelDRAW, is actually called a weed box. If I undo it, you can see that the item is still selected, but now it's just called curve. And the reason that we need it to be called weed box is when we go to do our proof, EasyStone needs to know what's a weed box and what's part of the design. because what it's going to do, it's going to add our watermark to the weed box object. But if we had a piece of vinyl, a part of our Christmas design here, then obviously it wouldn't add that. Okay. So anyhow, just something to kind of keep in mind. So when we hit OK at this point, what's actually going to happen in this process, not only is it going to name all of our redstones light cyan, and we could actually change this. So let's do that. Let's just say, I don't know, let's just say we want a hot pink Santa. Okay, so now it's changed all of our stones to hot pink, and we click OK. And not only has it changed all of our stones to hot pink, but it's also changed the diameter of our stones. You see now what was 3.4 is now 3.2, what was 2.6 is now 2.4, and what was 4.8 is now 4.5, because those were the settings we determined were the sweet spot that we need for our cutting software and our cutter. All right. So that's how to change the physical stone size in a design to make your cutter cut exactly the way you want to, should you have a need to do that. So hopefully that'll help you getting, better results on your cutting and whatnot, and make your templates a little bit easier to work with, being how you can fine tune those settings there. All right. And Anne asked, is that change just for that file? And no, that change is done and saved. Whatever fixed size you have set, that is saved in Easy Stone. So if you close it and reopen it, you'll still have those same fixed settings. But then it doesn't really matter what file you open. If it's a file from the Rhinestone world, or there's another company called Bling Art USA. I mean, there's lots of different companies that sell rhinestone files already designed, and we all use different circle sizes. I don't know if you've ever noticed, those of you who buy rhinestone designs from various sources, we all use a different diameter. I use the values that I use because that's what I started with. I think I bought a file from someone, and that's what they were using. So I figured, well, that must be a good size to use. And what I did is I actually went and calibrated my cutter to utilize. So I'm not using the factory settings on my cutter. I think from the factory, my cutter will cut. It's set at 1024. I don't really know what that number is. But what I did is I modified the number because my cutter was cutting the circles too big. So I think I calibrated my cutter to use some kind of crazy number like 872. I don't know what that 872 is, but I know I needed my holes to be cut smaller than what it was actually cutting. So I changed my number. I figured out where the sweet spot was, and so I forced my cutter to use these circle sizes. And so I've just done that ever since. But no matter what the current hole size is, it will automatically convert that, and that will kind of bring us into our next topic here. Let me find it first of all. So I had someone send me this file. I gotta find it here. This was a free file that was posted, and this file is a free file that I don't know if it's still free or not, but I had downloaded ages ago from the Stone Ranger, which is Steve Grimes. Let's throw a weed box behind it so we can see it perhaps a little bit better here. And what happened is the customer who asked about this design, what he was struggling with is once he went through and converted this design to the circle sizes that he wanted to use, the design then had a lot of openings that he didn't like. So let me show you what we're going to do here. So let's just select it. We'll convert it. And so this is what EasyStone does. EasyStone chose the colors based on the color spectrum of what it thinks was the best match. So it took the original fill color, and this is what it's determined was the best match. And it kind of got it close. AB really should be crystal. So we just click in the square. Here it's amethyst, and we're really going to have amethyst be black. And what I did is I chose to have the eyes and the other part, the yellow part of the tiger, rather than have it two different colors of yellow, I just decided to have it one. So I've now, you can see these are the colors it's now going to be changed to, black and crystal and light topaz, but it's also going to change our circle size. So if we take a look at what was used, let's take a look at that. See, that is 4.8 and this is 3.4 and this is 2.6. So what's happened here, I guess Steve was using the same values that I was, because I think he asked me what values I used, and then he rolled with those values. So in this particular case, though, we've changed, remember back over here, we've changed the 2.4, 3.2, and 4.5. So what's going to happen here when we click OK, it's not only going to change the stone colors to match what we've asked it to match, but it's also going to change the actual physical dimension of the stone. So if we click on this one here, it's now 4.5. These are all SS16s, 4.5s, and these little guys right here are 2.4. So you could see here when it's not up against that black background, especially here, there's quite a bit of spacing between stones, and that's what he didn't really care for. He didn't really care for that stone spacing. So he asked me, well, how would you go about, quote unquote, fixing that so you didn't have that large of spacing between stones? And so we'll do a little bit of it just to kind of show you what I did. We won't do the whole thing, but first of all, one thing to consider is that this particular design is a symmetrical design, so we'll delete half of it. That's step one. The other thing that I noticed in this particular design, and in fact, let's back up a second. Let's throw a weed box behind it and let's take a look at it in a bit more detail. What you're going to find is when you're doing design work, if you look at this design and you ask yourself, well, which of the three colors in this design look, quote unquote, the sloppiest? And immediately when you look at the design, you see, well, the crystal stones, those look pretty good. The black stones do look pretty good. There are areas where there's quite a bit of spacing between the black stones, but if you look at the yellow stones, you can see there are what seems to be a lot of gaps. And so, like, for example, right here, there's a pretty good sized gap. Right here, pretty good sized gap. Right here, pretty good sized gap. Here, pretty good sized gap. So as you look through the design, you see there's quite a few gaps. And that's because the original designer decided that for whatever reason, he didn't want to use two different stone sizes for the color yellow. And so this might come up quite frequently where you purchase a design that you sort of like, but it isn't exactly the way you would want it to be. Well, we can still utilize this as a base and make the necessary adjustments to it without recreating the design all over from scratch. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you here. You'll see that the design will probably look much nicer by introducing that extra stone size. I mean, we've already got two stone sizes for crystal and two stone sizes for black. So I don't see really why not have two stone sizes for yellow, especially if it's going to give us a better end result. So again, it's a symmetrical design, so luckily we only have to fix half of it, or maybe that's too harsh a word, fix it. It's just alter it to meet our needs. In the process, we'll learn a little bit about Corel Draw too. So let's start right here on the outside edge. These are all SS10 yellows. So we'll switch over to our freehand pick tool. And what we want to do is we want to hold down the Alt key and we could swipe through. Now I'm pretty good with my mouse. I can control my mouse pretty good, and we'll swipe back, right back through. So you see what I did there? By holding down my Alt key, basically what we're asking CorelDRAW to do is anything that we crossed over, make a selection of that. And so you can see now we have a whole selection of all of our yellow. Now what we have to do is we want to respace these stones so they're all evenly spaced. So to do that, we have to first of all deselect the start or end stone by holding down our shift key, and then we can reselect it. And then if we right click, we'll space all those apart. So you see here, we spaced those all apart. Now what's happened here? Why do we have so many stones? Well, this happened to me the first time I did this file too, so I'm just going to undo that. What I'm actually going to do is run a check to see if there are stones on top of stones, which there must be in this particular instance. So we'll select the entire file, check spacing. This is always a good idea to do with every file that we purchase because we have that simplified feature built in here to EasyStone. So I think what's happened here is that the entire, I know it says it found 246 objects. There's 811 total, so I'm not really sure, but needless to say, it found a whole bunch of overlaps. So now we've gotten rid of our overlaps, and now we can go back and make that same selection. So Alt key, you can see I'm way out here outside the design, and then I'm going to just drag in and try to go through all those yellow stones and then come back through again, back to the top, and then we have all those stones selected. And then we have to unselect the start stone and then reselect it. And then when we right click, it's going to start the respacing from the bottom. And because all these are the same color and same size, you can now see that they've attached these stones to a path because our target button is lit up. So all we have to do is left mouse click to add a couple more stones. Or if we wanted to, probably the quote unquote correct way to do this would be to clear out these stones altogether, set our stone color here in EasyStone to light topaz. Our stone size is already set to SS10, and when we click on add stones, it'll recalculate how many stones should fit along that path. And now you can see that that stone spacing is much closer than the rest of the entire design. And so basically what I did was I went through the whole design of the same thing. We'll do this outer row here of black stones. So now all of these will become selected. Shift unselect, Shift reselect, and then I can right click on D, and then I can use my left mouse button to add a couple additional stones. And then you can see how much tighter this row of stones is compared to this one. And we would do that throughout the entire design until we got everything exactly the way we wanted it. So it took a little bit of work, a little bit of time, but we can definitely utilize what's already there and then just kind of fine tune it. And here, what I did was because there's a lot of extra room, I think at some point I decided, well, I could do, I don't have to do all of it in SS16. So I think what I did was I did that outer row, and then to fill in the inner row, I use 10s and 6s. Or if there is room for 2 10s, then we can use 2 10s as well. So I didn't use as many 16s. So maybe you've downloaded this design and you don't have any 16s, but you kind of like the design. You could still use it, get rid of all the 16s and just redesign the part that you need to for your particular use. So remember to make a duplicate stone. You just drag with your left mouse and right click, and that will get you a duplicate. So you could do something like that, and just fill it in a little bit tighter, however you want to do it. So I just kind of went through the whole design and did it that way, and added in a few SS6 on the light topaz as well to fill in some of the other areas that I thought could see how much spacing there is between all of these stones. So we would want to tighten that up quite a bit, and then we can pull down an SS6. Stones always look better the closer you can get these stones together and still be able to cut your template, obviously, without your template tearing. I mean, to me, it looks, the tighter your stones are, the better it looks. So by adding in the SS6 stone size here in the light topaz, you'll get a much tighter fill throughout the whole design. So you can kind of use that design as a starting point, though, and make whatever changes you want to make. All right, let's see here. Any topic you want to see covered in Easy Stone. I was trying to think of a design that I wanted to do for tonight. Any suggestions on designs that you'd like to see? I have one that I really want to do really bad, but I don't want to upset nobody. That's not really true, because you know me, I don't really care if I upset anyone. But I've done a couple already. So if you want to do something fun that maybe we could use, I have an idea for one. So let's just do it, because I don't think it'll take us that long. Where the heck is it at? There it is. What do you think of doing this one? Do you love it? I kind of love it. Those of you who know me, I'm a Democrat by nature, but I do like Donald Trump, so let's do him quick, because it'll be pretty easy for us to do. So let's go ahead and set this one. We have our bitmap here. So we're going to set the size. So we'll do on the left and then the right. And that will give us our existing width. And we're going to change that to 9.5 inches. Make a little bit bigger one. And then we'll lock this image down. And let's just start with our 2016 text. What I like to see, I see there's varying degrees of width. You can see down here at the 2, it gets skinny and then bigger. So I think I will use 6s and 10s. So we'll start with 6s. I'll right click on, and I'm going to have to change my stone size back. So we're going to do 2.6, 3.4, 4.8. That's what I like to use to design with. So we have our stone size set to SS6. You can see our current stone color is light topaz, so we're going to right click and switch over to light cyan. And then we're going to right click on AS, and that will take us into drop stone, where I can just drop one single stone, and then I can hit the escape key to get out of that. And then I can use the stone fill nudge options to offset that SS6 stone like so. And now I want to offset an SS10 stone. And we have this new functionality because oftentimes we want to do this, and I like a little bit of perfection when I do this. So without doing math, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the advanced offset options. And what we're going to do is we're going to go from 6 to 10, because we're starting with a 6 and we need a 10. And if I nudge it up, what's going to happen here is this space between the 6 and 10 is exactly a half a millimeter, because it's actually this space, whatever this, in this case, it's exactly a half a millimeter. And then from here, I need to nudge it over, but this needs to be set to SS10 because I'm working with an SS10 stone. And in order to nudge it over half the distance, I can do Alt Control and I can nudge it over half the distance. Um, you know, half the distance of what I've got it already set to nudge. That's just kind of being real nitpicky, but and then I'll just use the offset option. And so every offset will be exactly a half a millimeter this way. And then for the tip of my 1, I think I'll switch over to a 6. Maybe I'll use 2 of them. I don't know. I'll probably just use 1. All right. So 1, that is now, quote unquote, the official height of our number there. Excuse me. All right. So now that we have our official height, I'm going to take a 6 or an SS6 stone and place it right there on my 6, but I want the height of this to be the same as my number 1. So I'll hit T for top, and that will have to move it down just a little bit. And I'm going to just manually place these stones as I see them. So just hitting my space bar to make the necessary duplicates. And then same thing here, space bar, space bar, space bar. So that's all I'm doing is just hitting the space bar. Same thing here, space bar, space bar. Don't worry, even if it's overlapping, who cares? You don't have to worry about that. We just want to kind of get these stones roughly placed in here. So see what I did there? I've got all kinds of overlaps going on, what have you, but it won't matter for our next step. So what we want to do now is take all of these stones along the bottom and respace them. But remember, we have to tell it where to begin that respacing. And the most logical place is at an intersection. So we're going to call this stone right here the start stone. So we're going to hold our shift key and get rid of that as part of the selection. You can see that stone is not part of the selection. And then the shift key and add it back in. That's the last selected stone. So when we right click on D, we can get everything spaced around. So you see what it did there. So now we know everything's nicely spaced. We'll go ahead and get rid of the path that we just made. And then we're going to respace these. So you can see how these aren't really nicely spaced up top there. So we'll do the same thing. We'll just select those stones back to the intersection here. And then right click. And now these are perfectly spaced up top, back to that intersection. So now that we have that, now we can move on to our 0. So we'll pull an SS6 over, and we'll pull an SS6 over, right click. I want this one to be right at the same height as my number 1. So I'm going to hold my shift key and add to that selection and then hit T for top. And now I want these two to line up perfectly as well. So we'll select this one and then C. That centers everything horizontally, left to right. So E will center everything top to bottom, C left to right, and of course T will align everything to the top, B will align everything to the bottom, L will align everything to the left, and R will align everything to the right. So if you know those little shortcuts when you want to align one object with another, it makes it a lot easier if you remember those shortcuts. All right, now what I'd like to do is kind of show you some of the precision that I do when I'm making a design. Well, the 0 obviously is symmetrical, so we only want to design half of it, number 1. And then number 2, rather than just kind of come in here and put some stones at the bottom and then come up here and put some stones at the top like that, we could do it this way. You see what we kind of did? We just kind of threw in some stones. And then we could take all of these and respace them. And then you could mirror them. So we'll mirror them. And then we would have our 0. And quite honestly, no one would be none the wiser. All right. Now, that's not how I would do it, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So let me just show you what I would do. You may want to do this, you may not. But we have some tools here in EasyStone that does make it easy for us to be a little bit more precise, if we so desire. So what we can do, first of all, we have our starting midpoint. These two are lined up, dead center. This, if I add a guideline to the bottom, see on my 1, you can see how this circle is dead on the bottom of this one. If I go top, you can see that this circle matches up dead to the top. So we know that that matches up perfectly. But what I need to find out is where the midpoint is of the number. I don't know where that is. So I can select these two objects, or I can select my 1. Either way, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to add a guideline. But I'm going to hold my shift key down. And when you're holding your shift key down, it's going to treat this object that I have selected as a group. So when I hit CVH, you can see what it did as center vertical. So that's why it says CV. But if I right click, which is what I need to do, then it goes CH, center horizontal. And so we know that this guideline now represents dead center height of our number. So I'm going to take an SS10 stone here and put it dead center on that guideline. Now, if I come in and just focus on the bottom half of my 0, something like this, that's all I really need to focus on. Once I have that in position, I'll go ahead and respace those. I can then take the selection and right click on mirror, and now I have the entire thing, and we know it's perfectly symmetrical top and bottom because we started from the center point. And then we do the same thing here, except we left click this time. Right click if we want to mirror vertically, left click if we want to mirror horizontally. And so now we have a perfectly symmetrical 0. So you wouldn't necessarily have to go through all that work, but that's how I would do it, to do it quote unquote properly. All right, so let's go ahead and keep going here. Now for our number 2, and our number 1 at the bottom we use 6s. For our number 2 here, we actually need to use 10s. So we'll go ahead and change our stone size to 10, but you can see now that the SS10 falls below that line, and of course we don't want that. So we'll select these two and hit B for bottom. And so now that SS10 is right along the bottom there, which is fine. And then we can go ahead and use our offset. And then probably what I'll do is I'll manually, because we have this kind of little tail going on with our 2, I'll just manually place a couple of stones there. I don't know if I'll use 3 or 2. We'll figure that out at the very end. And then of course we'll remember when we're putting 2 different stone sizes together, I like to do it either nestle it in between 2 or dead center. In this case, we're going to nestle between 2 stones. Just make some copies by using our space bar. When we see the letter getting thicker, and then we'll come back around. But our very top point, we want to make sure that it's at the same top point as our 0. So we'll select them both and hit T for top. And that right there becomes our new baseline, so to speak. So we'll just kind of reshuffle these a little bit. And obviously we'll have to reshuffle these a little bit to fit in that new, there we go. So we'll try something like that. So now I can go ahead and use the respace function to respace. And now if we want to pull all that away from the original artwork, we could see what we like about it or what we don't like about it. And so you can see once we pull it away from the original artwork, it actually doesn't look too bad. I would probably go ahead and take our 0 and just nudge it over a little bit, and our 6, and maybe nudge it over to the left a little bit. Like to see that spacing between numbers a little bit more perfected and perfect that way. So there is 2016, step number 1. Now for Trump, we're going to do this horizontal line. What I'm going to do with that is I'm going to use some SS16 stones, and we'll do it in cobalt blue. I think it will hit the escape key. We'll go ahead and offset that a number of times. Let's use our step function here to offset that 20 times to the right. I have no idea how many times we really needed, but in this case I guess we needed more than 20. So let's do 10 more offsets, and then we could just cut away whatever we don't need. Now, just to add a little bit of character to the design, I'm going to offset this 1 row and then change it to 6. And then I'm going to bump it up. And then I'm going to change that stone color to crystal. So now we have something like this. Let's take our 2016 and group it together. And we can use the group function here in Easy Stone, or we can just remember the Corel Draw shortcut, which is Control G. And now we could take this and we'll bring it down here and do the same thing. We'll group this together. And the reason I chose cobalt blue and crystal is because the 2016 was already in red, so it'll be basically red, white, and blue. So we'll go ahead and throw a weed box around it, and we could take a look at it. So I kind of like the look of these particular stones being a little bit more spaced apart. You know, you could make them a little bit tighter spacing if you wanted to, whatever. But I kind of happen to like the look of that, so that's why I went with that. So let's go ahead and leave that. And then let's move on to Trump here. So for our Trump text, I like to try some different things. So I have an idea of what I might want to try. One of the things I might want to try here is using 6s along the bottom. So we'll start there on the T here. We'll just start with our T. So we use 6s along the bottom, and I'll just offset a few times. And then I'll hand place a 10, and I'll offset that. So let's do that. And then what I'd like to try is I'd like to try to use a set of 6s next to this column of 10s. So we'll copy it over and use 6s. And then what we'll do here is this I'll put right to the top. So if we add a guideline there, you see how those two line up perfectly to the top. And then down here, I'm going to line these up to the bottom. So I select my small one, and then what I want to match it to. I want to match it to the big one and hit B for bottom. And now, of course, you can see that the guideline lines those up perfectly at the bottom. So now what do we do in between here? Well, we don't have enough stones in between because we have all this spacing. So unlike what we did horizontally, I don't want to do that vertically. I want to have as many stones vertically as I can. So I'm just going to select one of my small ones and hit the plus key a couple times. That's going to add 2 additional copies. And then I can select my top stone, hold my shift key, select the bottom one. And if we hit S, that will select everything in between, even those duplicates, when we hit the plus key on our numeric keypad. So now when I hit vertical, see how much tighter that row of stones is? Now, a lot of times when you're doing design work, sometimes your ideas will work and sometimes they don't. In this case, I think the lettering is big enough that it will allow us to do that special 2-column. So where we're using 2 different stone sizes, and I think that'll just add a little bit of artistic flair, I think, to the design. So we'll go ahead and, so you see what I did there. I used 2 small ones, and then I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it something like that. So we don't have to do exactly the way the original artwork was, but we can get it pretty close. And then I'll just copy this over to this side. So we'll mirror it, and I'm just eyeballing it here. I've done it enough where we can just eyeball it. So now that we have that first letter in place, we can kind of use it more or less as a template for everything else. So we'll go ahead and copy this over for our R and delete the stones that obviously we don't need for that. So you can see here for our R, we'll come down here and we'll go ahead and offset this a couple of times. And then we'll start in with our bigger stone. And we have to respace these. So we'll go ahead and grab all the ones that we want to respace. Right click on D to respace them. We'll go ahead and copy a few of these over. I guess I'll copy 4 of them. And then we'll try, see if we can't just do it like this. So here we have to kind of put that one there, and we'll put that one there, and then we don't need this one. So I like these to be straight. So we'll straighten those up. And that will be, so we're just going to do 1 stone width here, but we did on the big column we did 2. So again, we're going to use this as a template and just go all the way across. So for our P, we basically already have that done here with our R. So we can just copy this straight across and get rid of the little tail. So that's taken care of. Now for our U, we're going to go ahead and copy these stones over, what we can use just for that first column. Don't need this one, obviously. But then at some point here on the U, it switches over. This becomes our baseline. So now this stone at the bottom of the U is exactly at the bottom of our R. And then we can kind of keep coming, but at some point we change. So I think what we'll do here is we'll try and put in a 10 here. And then we'll do a 6 here. So you see that small change we did to make that change into the column. So all we have to do now is take the associated stones here. So we're just going to select all of these, that first column there, and respace those. And then do the same thing over here. Just select them all. We'll go all the way down to the bottom. And we'll right click and sort those out. So now that stone spacing all the way down and around is perfect. Now, we want to kind of continue this process over here. So what I'm going to do here is, but over here, it's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to copy this one over and offset 4 times, just like it was here on the left. But these are all small stones. And then I'm just going to manually move one big one in and then come down and we'll do small. And then we'll just offset this. And then once we get to a certain point, then I'll just manually make some copies. Okay, so then what I need to do is I need to respace all of these to the center point again. So again, I'll just come in here and make a selection, right click, and now you can see those are all perfectly spaced all the way down and around. Now for our M, it's a little bit more difficult because we have 2 columns kind of with our M, but I think what we're going to do here, and you just kind of have to start somewhere and see what you think looks good. we are going to, this is another thing that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is the big stone is always on the left, and then the little stone's on the right. And so even for our M, the big stone has to be on our left, and the little stone has to be on our right. Again, that's just me. It doesn't have to be that way. That's what I do. On our U here, we already have basically this already created for our U. So I would copy that down and mirror it. And then we have a couple options. We could group this together and then select this stone here and hit B for bottom, and that would move it so that these two are lined up. Or if we wanted to leave these individual pieces, what we could do is add a bottom guideline, and then when we move these, it would snap right to that guideline. And then we wouldn't have to group those together. So, it really doesn't matter about either way. But we do need this one on top of this one. And then we have to, for our top part here, I think what I'll do is I'll just copy over from our U, and this will make small, and then offset a few times. And then I have to space these all vertically. V for vertical. Now I'm not happy with that spacing. See, there's quite a bit of space between there. So what I'll do is I'll hit the plus key on my keyboard, and I'll select the top and bottom stone and hit select. That'll select everything in between, including my duplicate. And so now that spacing is a lot tighter, which I think I'll be more happy with. Now I am going to use, at the point here, I am going to use an SS10 stone, because I also want to use an SS10 stone right here. And then we'll just connect the two. So I just selected them both and hit add stones. So now you can see we've added stones there. And then on this side, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to delete that stone, put it right in between those two, come all the way down here, right alongside that one, and connect the two. Just like that. So now we have all of our Trump text done. So let's add that to what we've already got going here. Let's group it together, and then we could center everything up and move it down. So what I do want to do, though, is I want to add a little bit of space. Looking at my T, first of all, one thing I want to do here, looking at the T, I think it should be a little bit wider than it is. It just looks weird next to the R. As wide as the R is, the T looks a little bit, the top part looks a little bit too narrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to nudge, I'm going to ungroup it and see what it looks like if I were to add another SS6 stone. I don't know if it looks too big. That might be the next problem. Would it look too big? So let's just add one and find out. And the short answer is yes. I think that might look too big. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm too critical. I think I'll leave it. I don't think it looks too big. I'm 50-50. But we do need a little bit of space between the M and the P. See here, we need that little bit of separation there just to make it a little bit more pronounced. And then we want to make sure across the board that all the letters look pretty uniformly spaced as well. And I guess it does. Not sure where that came from. So let's go ahead and group this back together, and then we can center it. But I guess we have to group this too. And our 2016, we'll group it too. So let's center it all up. And that is a little bit easier to see now what we actually did there. It looks like I deleted one stone. that I shouldn't have on our R. So you can see we spent a little bit of time, a little bit of effort in creating that text, but it looks a lot better than any pre-bought rhinestone font. I can promise you that, that you could find. So taking the extra time to make it allows us to make exactly what we want. So now we just have to do the Donald's hair and face here. And of course that is pretty simple to do. It's not very big, so that will help us. But sometimes, depending on what the design is, sometimes we have to create the container, and then we fill the container. And at other times, we have to get all the interior details done first, like on the tiger that we were showing you earlier. See, I would have started with his eyes, get the eyes detailed, and kind of build out. So sometimes you have to think about, well, what the design is and figure out exactly, do I start from the outside in or do I start from the inside out? In a case like this, where it's basically just a silhouette, we want to start from the outside in. So let's go ahead and begin. We'll set our stone color to light cyan, first of all, by right-clicking the light cyan square. We are going, at the tips here, we are going to be using SS6. So let's go ahead and drop one there and one there. And then we can hit the escape key. And then let's just begin at this little tip right here. So the next one in, I think I'll switch to a 10. And then we'll do 2 6s. And then we should be able to do 2 10s. And then basically I stop and I come to the other side. So, and you'll see this if you go back and look at a lot of my designs, especially with these sharp points, you'll see that same pattern. So it starts with a 6, right click 10, and then we do 6 and 6, and then we do 10 and 10. So look at some of those different things and you'll see that pattern. So now once we have that, a 10 and a 10 on either side, I'm going to go ahead and do Shift AS, and what that allows me to do, the shift portion allows me to immediately modify my path. So you can see I have these control handles where I can then modify my path. And we're just using this as a guide, so it doesn't have to match up perfectly. If we want to add an additional stone in there, we could by hitting our target key, which in this case I will. So let's do the same thing. We have these two, shift. I've selected one, I'll hold my shift key and select the other, shift AS, and then we can bend it. And then in order to get our control handles, we have to click on a control point. And in this case, it's either the start or the end. So we click on it here on the start. Now we have our control handles, which we can bend to our mercy. And so we can fine tune till we're happy with the result. Okay, I'm happy with that. You can see that the stone spacing is a little bit too much. So we'll hit the target key a few times, tighten that up, and we can right click to loosen it. So sometimes we'll tighten it too much. Look at that. Now our stones are overlapping. So just right click, get rid of a stone or here or there till we're happy with our stone spacing, and then we can delete our path. Okay. So then we move on to the fill portion. And you can see right here, we have a bit of a gap. What I would do in this case is I would sooner fill it with a 6 and have it overlap than to have a bigger gap. So that's really a design choice that you'll have to make once you get into cutting your templates and seeing how exactly that type of overlap either works for you or doesn't it. You'll know what's acceptable and what's not. But then we just kind of, here again, it's super tight. the stone spacing, but I would rather have that than be left with that, because now this gap is quite a bit. So I'd rather have it super tight, like so. We can even respace just those 4 stones. So it'll be really tight here, but like I said, I'd rather have that than have it, super loose there. And then I'll stop. Sometimes I'll stop and I'll go back and forth. I'll do a little bit on one side, then I'll come back through, do a little bit on this side. I'll respace these using the respace function so they're even. Same thing here. I'll respace these so they're even. All right. So now we're kind of up to this point here. Well, now we can do kind of the same thing that we did previously. We're back to 10s on both sides. So Shift AS, and then we can hit our control point and utilize our little arrows to fine tune exactly how those are going to go into place. I'm going to add an extra stone in there to make it a little bit tighter, because now what we have to do is decide what do we want to do here. If you look here, the stone spacing is such, we have to decide, are we going to use, in this case, you can see what the spacing is. Let me just show you. That's what the spacing is going to be. If we leave it alone, that's what the spacing would be. The other thing that we could do in theory is we could use 3/6, and that would work. And that would be better. To me, that would be better than using 4/10s and having this extra gap. Okay, but I don't like using 10s and 6s and then having this big chunk right here be all 6s. I would not like that. It doesn't, to me, it would not look right. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, what do you do? Let me see if I can back up far enough here. What I would do in that scenario is modify the original artwork. So we have up to this point. I'd just go ahead and put that second row like it should be. Like so. And then for the next row, we just have to modify the original artwork. So rather than leave the gap, we'll make the gap between stones basically equal. And so you can see we've only modified the artwork a little bit. But that way, it's, like I say, you're just using it as a reference. It's not absolute. So we're going to respace those stones. And now if we pull the hair away from the design and just kind of look at it by itself, you don't really even notice that it's not exactly what the original artwork was. There is a slight difference, but it just looks so much better than having all those extra SS6 stones in there where we don't necessarily need them. Okay, so all right, yeah, Keith, thanks for reminding me. Keith wants to see about doing color separations, and that'll be a good one. We could do it with this one once we're all done here. All right, so now for the next part here for the face, obviously his silhouette here in his trademark hair, These are all important details for people to recognize, spot off, what this actually is. So we're going to go ahead and start with some SS10s. I guess we'll switch over. We'll just do this in hot pink so you can see it in the video, hopefully pretty easy. And what I would start in is the details here. So we're going to switch over to 6. Tell you what, I don't think that's going to look very good. So we'll go back to 10. And sometimes we'll do something and it won't actually look as good as we thought it would. So then we have to back out and try something different. So we'll just try doing this way and see if we like it. So I threw in one stray SS6 there so far. We're going to go right to the tip and we'll do a 6, a 10. Remember we did 2 6s and then 2 10s. We could even do a 6 and a 10, depending on, in this particular case, we could probably get by with that too. Depends how tight that point really is. And on this one here, we might even do something really crazy and do 3 6s. So we just kind of follow the original artwork. Could be kind of tricky getting all the face details in there, but I think I'll be happy with that. Now for the star here, I do want some nice straight lines. So we'll get those in. I would not concern myself about that little bit of overlap. Now the spacing between these stones, I'm not super happy with. It's a little bit farther apart than these, but there isn't enough room to put in another one either. They would be too tight. So we just live with it. So you can see here, we're just putting in all the straight lines. Again, don't sweat that little bit of overlap. Your stones will still brush in just fine. And then to do the outside here, we need that to be a 10. And then we're going to connect this 10 and this one way over here. Position it. And then we can, again, click on the outside to get your control handles. And then we can go ahead and fine tune it. Now in this case, because it's so far apart, what I would probably do is just go ahead and double click on this path. And doing that will add a control point. So now you see we have a set of control handles here. We have a control handle here and here. Now we have 4 control handles. But there is something I want to point out to you. When you're adding those control points like I just did, if you just click on the path like I just did, it's going to add a symmetrical node. It's important that we understand what the difference between a symmetrical node and a cusp node. If we look at this node that I just added, it's a symmetrical node. And we know that because when we modify one control handle, the other control handle moves in a symmetrical motion. And so it moves with it. Well, we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to back up a minute here. So we still have our path selected, but at this point we haven't added a control point. When you're adding your control points, if you get in the habit of holding down your C key on your keyboard and we add a cusp node by double clicking, we still have the same control handles, don't we? But watch what happens when I modify one here on the left. The one on the right stays perfectly still, so it hasn't moved at all. And what that allows us to do is just take better control of the design that way. So we're only controlling one segment of the path and not the entire path. So you can see here how we can control this half of it without worrying about the other half. So if you can get in the habit of doing that, now we can add a control node. And if you do add a control node and accidentally don't hold your C key down, you can right click on any node and change it from a cusp to a symmetrical. In this case, it's a smooth node. That's why it's grayed out. So we could choose symmetrical or cusp. So if we wanted to change it to a cusp, you could do it that way after the fact as well. But let's add a couple of stones along that outside path there. And so now let's go ahead and move this away entirely. Because I guess we do need this. We need to finish the container here. All right, so now our container is done. Now let's move it away. Make a duplicate of it. So now it's just a matter of filling in what's left. And, pretty much the stones will dictate to you what will either fit or don't fit. So in this case, we just kind of just begin the process of filling this in. I'll respace and keep moving. So we'll do kind of all the way up here. Well, that ain't gonna quite work, is it? So we'll just put those in and respace and keep moving on here. So we'll come up here to this other tight corner. Sixes and tens. And all I'm doing is with my left mouse moving and then right clicking to make a duplicate. And then once I kind of have this row, then I'll select that and right click and respace those out so they're all nice and even. So I just kind of do that as I go here. And I've done it so much that it just kind of becomes second nature to me. And I suspect, the more you do your design work too, the more obvious it will become to you. And then when you get to that finishing point where you're kind of finishing off the design, sometimes, it doesn't quite look exactly like you'd want it to. But so there is some give and take, at the very end of how all these stones kind of fit together in that little tiny area there. But what I like to do is I kind of like to follow the path, this outside. So just kind of give you an idea, do something like that and just kind of follow, just like down here. Now this outside path here, this very outside, I think these stones are too far apart. I think they could be closer together. So I'll select all of them, respace them, and then with my target key I could add in a couple of stones and make that a little bit tighter. Now I showed you this trick before, but it's good to repeat it. If we want to offset the existing path of stones, let's just select the existing path, draw a line, that will create us a path, and then we're going to offset it to the inside. And then if we add stones to it, see what we did there. And we'll respace them. So then we didn't have to copy them one by one by one. We just kind of, so now these two are overlapping. So we'll just select these going this way. You don't have to go all the way. In this case, I think I will go all the way, but you wouldn't have to. and then right click, and then now they're not overlapping back over here again. So then here I think we'll drop it down to a 6, because then we can fit a 6. And so now we have a gap there, which we didn't have before. So you can see what we did there. That fits. So now to fill in that gap, we have to go back in and select. Now, in this case, I won't go all the way back to the end of this row. We'll just kind of go back a ways and even out that spacing. So there wasn't quite enough room right there to fit an extra 10 in there, but we're going to make it work. I just modified that a little bit. A lot of times I'll do that. I'll just kind of break it off into little sections when I'm doing the fill, so it doesn't maybe seem as quite as daunting to get it all filled in. In this case, I'll switch down to 2 6s. Of course, as you know, when I'm doing my fills, I don't mind it for a bit using SS6s in everything I do. Just because it's easier to design with using 6s, and I think it looks better too. You get a better end result. And once again, you get down to where it all has to come together, and then sometimes you got to make some sacrifices to make it all look good. This one here, if there's some slight overlaps, I'm okay with that too. So you can see right here the stones are kind of close together, but otherwise it looks pretty good. So then we'll just kind of finish it off over here. So I'll start with my outside stones. And then just to even these out, I'll respace them. So now they're a little bit more even. And here we could probably live with all 10s there in that row. And I always try and find shortcuts. I don't like hand placing every single stone, and I don't worry about, see how these are overlapping a little bit, but that's not going to matter. Really what we're going to do is we're just going to throw in these stones. So sometimes I get really lazy and I just start throwing them in. So all I'm doing is just kind of roughing them in, hitting my space bar as I go to make the various duplicates. Trying to figure out exactly, what's going to work here. So we're just going to rough everything in. And then we'll just kind of take it row by row. And we'll space everything back out again. So I'm going to come in here and first of all check for any overlaps. There are a few. See, I guess there's just one. And then kind of row by row, just go through and even out the spacing. So we'll right click on D. We're going to start doing all the horizontals first. Right click on D. So you can see horizontally all these stones are being evenly spaced horizontally. But you can see like right here, this stone is closer than these two. So then we'll have to go back and do the same thing vertically. I'm just trying to get the horizontal figured out first. And then right up top here, one more row. All right, so now we've taken care of all the horizontals, and now we're going to come in vertically. Anywhere I see there's an issue right up, kind of right up there. So I went ahead and sometimes what we have to do is we have to do horizontal, vertical, and then we'll come back horizontal again one more time. We'll just kind of see how these stones all shake out. And if there's a little bit of overlap here and there in the design, I'm not too worried about it. Like these two stones right here are really close together. But as long as it's more or less accurate, that's fine. There's a little bit of overlap right here at the tip of that star. We could try and get rid of without still having that nice defined tip. Same thing here. We could try that too here. Having it nice and evenly spaced and still having that nice defined tip of our star, which I think we do. So I'll live with that. All right, so that is the basic finished fill of his face. I am going to have to change the color, obviously. So we'll change it over to cobalt blue. And then we'll see what it looks like here. I'm going to take the Trump 2016 and group it all together. And I want to space it. So we'll put this vertically. So I want this to be perfectly centered on this, which now it is because I selected them both and hit E for centering. And there is the finished product. The only thing I don't know, I might throw in an SS6 to tighten these stones up along the bottom here. I think it needs it. That might be too tight. So we'll use a couple of SS6s. And then we'll respace these going vertically. And maybe we'll do the same thing this way. And then we'll spread them out horizontally again. That might be overthinking it a little bit, but sometimes I'm a bit of a perfectionist that way. All right, so let's copy this over. This is kind of our new finished product here. Let's copy it over. We'll run a quick proof on it. So we'll hit QP. And what that's going to do is it's going to simulate our design. It's going to add a dimension of our design, and it's going to add our watermark. Now, a while back, I don't know why, but sometimes I like using gray background and sometimes black. So it always defaults to gray unless there's black in our design. No, it defaults to gray always, I guess. I forget. There's a rule. I even forget what my own rule was. But anyhow, sometimes I'll use gray background. In this case, I think it'll look better if we use a black background. But we have all of our stone sizes in place, and you know, all the different stones that we used and everything in the design. And you know, considering it is a rhinestone design, yeah, the face details probably aren't as crisp as we might like. But I think with the Trump 2016 text, we get the idea that this is his silhouette of his face. And sometimes those details, those fine details, like the lips and the nostrils and stuff, are hard to get perfect in a rhinestone design. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to look at color separating the design. This was one of the topics that actually a few people have struggled with, so they can't get it to work right. I'm not quite sure why, other than the fact that this is a beta version, technically speaking. And I think there are a couple minor bugs, but I haven't had too much trouble with color separations. So let's just go ahead and do what Skeet was doing. We talked about it a little bit in our last session too, about that two-cut option, but we're just going to select the entire design with the weed box, and we're going to choose Export Vector File. And for this experiment, we'll just export it to CorelDRAW file, so we won't actually export it to a file at all. But we will choose the two-cut option. So for our first template, what do we want in our first template? Well, I think probably what I would do is I would probably put crystal 6 and 10, obviously, on one template. But we could also put light cyan with crystal very easily. So that's what I'm going to do for template 1. And then for template 2, we'll just put cobalt blue on that one. And we chose the create two cut template option and the export directly to CorelDRAW file. We'll go ahead and choose export files. So it should do our color separations and then convert the template to a two-cut template. And remember from our last session, we talked a little bit about the two-cut template. What that does is it creates a special template using special circles that will force your cutter to make 2 revolutions per circle. I believe Skeet's using a Roland cutter, if I'm not mistaken, and the Roland Cut Studio software does not have that double cut function. It's really old software, and so I'm pretty sure he's using a Roland GX24, and so it doesn't do the double revolutions. And so you can see here we do in fact have our color separations like we need them. So what I would do for the red and crystal template is just take a little piece of hot fix tape and cover up your crystal stones, brush in your 6s and 10s for red, and then you could pull off that piece of hot fix tape and brush in your crystal stones. And then of course your second template would just be all cobalt blue and the 3 different stone sizes. And that's it. Should be really, really straightforward to do. Of course, if you wanted to split it out into 3 templates, you could. And Anne was asking about what did I hold down, but that was a minute ago, so I don't know. And by the way, that two-cut template feature has not been changed at all. Haven't touched it from version 3.1 to version 4. So if you look at your EasyStone install, it should say version 3.1 right up here. And if it doesn't, well, then you need to at least get version 3.1 installed, because that is the latest one from version 4. So I'll get this Trump 2016 template posted for you. Yeah, see what, just to kind of go over those alignment options. C, you see here they're kind of offset. We'll align left to right, and then E will align top to bottom, dead center. And of course, T will align the very top edges, and then B for the very bottom edges. And then of course, left and right as well. Oh yeah, C for adding a cusp node. Yes. So if we have a straight line, if I draw a straight line, switch to my shape tool, and I just double click on that line and right click, you can see what kind of node. None of them are lit up. So if I move that node, because it's a straight line, it's always going to be a cusp in this case. It's always going to be a cusp. Cusp is not lit because it's already a cusp, and because it's a straight line, it can't be smooth or symmetrical. But if I were to right click and change this line to a curve, it's still a line, but the way CorelDRAW sees it, it's a bendable line. See, we can bend it, so it's actually a curve. Well, if I double click on that and then right click, you see what it is. It's a smooth node. So if I change the handles on one, then the other handle gets changed with it. However, if I hold my C key down and double click and then right click, I can see what kind of node it is. And right now you can see it's a cusp node. So now if I move this control handle, I only control that half the line. And then if I move this control handle, I can control the other half. So cusp nodes are really, really useful. And it's just a matter of holding down your C key to create it a cusp node when you're adding those control points. All right, well, I'm all yours if you want me to show you anything else. Otherwise, I'm going to sleep for a long time, I hope. And also, I do like making videos just to post as needed. So if you do come up with a topic that you need, some help with, or maybe you have a particular font that you'd like to see a few of the letters stoned so you could get an idea how you might tackle it yourself. I like to little project videos to post every now and again. I can Anne asked about applying rhinestones to nylon, and to my understanding, you cannot apply rhinestones to nylon just by gluing them. So I'm thinking like now polyester, yes. So there's lots of duffel bags, backpacks, and things like that. That if you look at the content, it's actually polyester. So rhinestones will stick to polyester. And Krista, that could be another product for you too. Duffel bags, as when you're buying them wholesale. In fact, let me show you two of my favorite guys here. If you're wanting to buy some wholesale duffel bags, but Krista's been going crazy with making headbands. And I really like duffel bags and backpacks because one size fits all, unlike sweatshirts and whatnot. But I've maybe showed this to you before, but I like these guys out of Chicago, Nissan Cap, and they have caps and duffel bags and all kinds of stuff, and backpacks and everything. But everything they do is, I would say okay quality. It's definitely not top of the line quality, but it's okay quality, especially considering the price point. And then his brother is like right across the street, and his is Nissin Cap. So it's Nissun Cap, or it's Nissin Cap. And so they have a lot of the same products. But these two guys is kind of funny because they have showrooms like right across the street from one another. They used to be in business together, and then I don't know, one of them pissed the other off, and so then they split into two different companies. So it's kind of funny, but anyhow, they're in Schaumburg, Illinois, and I used to live up there, and so I used to go through there quite a bit. But so if you're ever up there, you can look at their showroom and actually buy product right there. Another place I was talking with Krista's husband about, talking about some different products was, and I'm sure most of you in the business for a while already know of Augusta Sportswear, but they also have backpacks and things. They're the Nissan guys I was telling you about. Most of their backpacks will run less than $8. Most of them less than $5 actually, and still of fairly decent quality. And stones will stick to their polyester bags. You just have to look at how the bag is made, but most of their bags are made of polyester. But Augusta has some really nice bags too. but most of their bags are $10 or more, but really, really high quality stuff too. But anyhow, they have all kinds of these jerseys and whatnot. And if you look at the different jerseys, come in various different colors, but see, this is 100% polyester. So stones will stick to that. But if you look closely too, there are other jerseys where they're nylon. So then they won't stick to nylon. So so that answers the question there and gives you a couple ideas for places to get good stuff. Another thing too, just for people who, Krista is new to the business, but just as kind of an idea for you. If you go to the ISS shows, first of all, if you've never been to an ISS show and you're in the t-shirt business, you really ought to go to one because, you'll learn a lot and see a lot of different things and whatnot. But let me see what I can show you here. What I have done is if you go to the ISS show and you look at the exhibitor list, sometimes you can look at if you're looking for a specific product. See, they have all these different categories. So maybe you want to look at cheer uniforms and stuff. This could actually be a good resource for you if you don't know where to go. And somehow I don't exactly know how. Let's see if we can just type in 2015. Yes, see here, this is Orlando. And you can look at the past show directory. So I think there's some way to get to it. I don't know exactly how though. But there, see, it shows 2016 show directory, but there is some way to get to the 2015 directory. And then you can go under the exhibitor list and then look at the different categories if there's a specific product you're looking for. If you want to look at for decals and emblems, and then it would show you, I guess these are all the companies that are already set for 2016. But Blue Generation, those guys have some really nice uniforms. And anyhow, it gives you some ideas of different wholesale companies you can look up in the different categories if you don't already know. So that might be a useful little tip for you. See, there's only two under decals and emblems. There's a Rhinestone World and Specialty Materials for 2016. But if you could get to the 2015 exhibitor list, the 1 year back, you'll probably have a whole bunch of companies that offer decals and emblems. So anyhow, just a little food for thought for you. And Ann asked about hand setting to nylon, and I guess you could, but not with glue. You'd have to, or excuse me, not with the hot melt glue on the rhinestone. You'd probably have to hand set with E6000 or something to that effect. Any other questions? Going once? All right, well, I will get this recording posted for you. Hopefully I'll get it done tonight for you so I don't forget. And then I'll get last week's session posted for you. So y'all have a good Christmas. For those of you who are Design of the Day members, I am going to be posting those first quarter designs I talked about the other day on the group, January, February, March 2013, all 90 of those designs. Well, I don't really know how many there'll be. There'll be at least 90, but any design that we posted January, February, March of 2013 will be added as a one download for you to kind of make up for the dates that were skipped in November and the dates that we're going to skip in December. I do have a few files done that I just need to get posted, some Christmas files. So I'll get busy and post those in the next few days. But you guys have a good Christmas, and then in the new year for Design of the Day members, just so we're clear on what to expect coming 2016, you spend $24.99 a month for Design of the Day. All right. Now, we do not post a new design every day. We never will. So, yes, it's called Design of the Day for a reason, and that means is for every day of the month, we will post a design. So you'll get 30 designs, but it won't necessarily be one design every single day. It may be 3 designs one day and nothing for the next 2, or we might skip 4 designs and then we'll make it up before the end of the month. One of the main reasons that we do skip designs, and I stress this a lot for members, is the reason we skip a day here and there is so that we can then fill a custom design request that comes in. So if we posted a new design every day, then we wouldn't be able to take custom requests. And I thought part of the beauty of the design of the day is if you need a particular baseball design or whatever it might be, and as long as it's generic, where it would apply to everyone. Maybe your school mascot is the Eagles. Well, that's not my school mascot, but surely, there's enough members where that Eagles mascot would be useful. And while my school mascot may not be an eagle, I may have a request from a customer whose school mascot is an eagle. So generic designs like that, we generally speaking, for design of the day, we don't really get into copyrighted designs. So let's say, for example, you wanted a Patriots logo. Okay, I would probably do that for you in a private custom design service, but I wouldn't do that as a design of the day. I don't like to get myself into too much trouble that way. So if it's a generic design that, I think everyone would be interested in, or it's something different, like we did a design that was requested the other day. It was like a necklace design. And I thought, well, that might not be to everyone's taste. It is generic enough and it's different. And you never know, if you're in the business, you never know what a customer is going to come in and request. So lots of variety. If you got lots of variety, you're bound to sell someone something. So even though you may not particularly care for the design or what have you, download it anyhow, because like I said, you never know what your customer might request. So just kind of keep that in mind. But getting back to the design of the day, one of the new perks for 2016 that I thought would be a really nice addition is the first design that we post every month. So like January 1, we'll have, New Year's Day, we'll have a design for that day. It will come with a PDF file with a special code, and that code will allow you to download $25 worth of designs. So, the design of the day in my mind is already a no-brainer. But now, for 2016, the first day of the month, you'll get a PDF file with a special code. Now, the only real catch to that is you have to use it in the month of January. So any old designs that we've posted before you became a Design of the Day member, you'll be able to go back in and pull off $25 worth of those designs that you'd otherwise have to buy without an additional cost to you. So that's the benefit. And in the coming year, there will be more designs posted than just Design of the Day designs. So you won't have to pay for them. So even if you have every other design in our entire library, there will be new designs in 2016 that will be posted to the store, but won't be posted for Design of the Day. So you'll still be able to utilize those coupon codes and pick up, those new designs that are added as well. So I think that'll be a real neat benefit for you, and you should definitely always get your money's worth for sure. So, any rate, I guess I'll let you go. And if you come up with more questions or you have a logo you want to see demonstrated, or even, like a lot of times it's just, well, where would you begin on something like this? Sometimes it's a real complicated logo and, you need some guidance on where to begin. I like making those videos that we can post, little project videos. As long as I can make a video of it and share it with everyone, then I'm happy to do it, because that's how we all learn, is just by looking at every single video out there. We already have a bunch, So at any rate, I will talk with you later. Thanks for watching.